Guys, while you guys are here in the room, let me just be clear about this. If your mic becomes unmuted, I'm going to mute your mic the first time. The next time, I'm going to remove you from the room. So please make sure that your microphone remains on mute and that I don't have to continue muting you. Please double check your microphones and make sure that your microphones are on mute, please. The lecture is being recorded. And we don't want
recording in progress.
We don't want someone's voice to be over the voice of those who are speaking, inshallah.
Okay. You don't say anything about this dynamic at some point. Well, thank you here, and I wish you the best. Thank you.
Once again, thank you guys for joining us this evening. Please make sure your microphones are on mute. La ilaha illallah. Okay, so I'm waiting for Sister Zafirah. Sister Zafirah, are you here? Sister Michelle?
Assalamu alaikum.
Hey, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. How you doing?
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing good.
Alhamdulillah, mashallah, tabarakallah. Thank you for joining us this evening. You can probably try to clean off your screen. It's a little fuzzy, a little blurry. Just want to make sure that everyone can see, everyone can hear before we get into this discussion. Give me 1 second. Okay, so let me begin with Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Thank you all for joining me this evening as we jump into a very, very important discussion. We will leave some time for questions and answers towards the end. So please do not interrupt the conversation with a question. If you have a question, you can go ahead and ask your question in the chat. And after the conversation is over with, I will go to the chat and I will go to the chat and I will allow everyone to ask their question, inshallah ta'ala. Once again, please make sure that your microphone remains muted. If your microphone becomes unmuted and I can hear the noise in your background, I am going to remove you from the Zoom room. You can go to Facebook, you can join the conversation on Facebook, or you can go to Clubhouse and join the conversation on Clubhouse, but I will remove you from the Zoom. All right, so please make sure that you refrain from touching any buttons on your computer, on your phone, so that we can hear the conversation, inshallah. Okay, so Sister Zafirah, if you could just kind of introduce yourself to everyone, give everybody an opportunity to know who you are, where they can find you. How did you come into this realm where you are speaking about this particular subject? Just give us a little bit about yourself, inshallah.
So I am a trauma counselor. I work in downtown Center City in Philadelphia. I started this journey about 2018 is when I graduated with my master's degree from Eastern University in clinical psychology with a focus in trauma. It started off with wanting to work with youth. It didn't work out so much, but I wound up starting in DNA, drug and alcohol.
Okay.
And what I have experienced with working it is that we all have the same kinds of themes, right?
What do you mean by that?
So as far as like with trauma, right? So what I mean by themes is we think of ourselves as different because our behaviors are different. But it's usually just a few things that are present that continuously happens all the time. So a lot of it is like neglect, whether it's from mom or from dad.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is because our family structures are a little bit off. Other communities have things in place that allows children to develop naturally and normally.
Like what?
So like one of the things is that other cultures have is like grandparents still live in the house, right? Because when a woman first had a baby and going through postpartum, hormones are all over the place. It's hard to care for the baby appropriately when you may be going through postpartum depression, you may be having postpartum psychosis. People don't think that that's a real thing that women go through. Even I have experienced it. With my first child, I thought I put my child in the pillow. I woke up, heard him crying. I was like, oh my God, I have him in the pillow. That could have easily became a ongoing symptom where then now I killed the baby.
Wow.
Right. So we don't realize that when someone first coming out, it's very imperative because those first about 6 years of life are so, so important. And people need to be stable. Women are not really that stable at that time because of the hormone fluctuation and stuff that's happening with her body. So then you have this thing called, because we live in this individualistic society that's not really conducive to mental health, you have this thing called failure to thrive, right? What people don't understand is that their whole idea of make your baby sleep in the crib, don't sleep with the baby, I don't recommend that. Now, granted, it has probably saved some lives in the past, but in the future, it's causing more harm because babies need to touch. They actually can die because of failure to thrive at the worst case scenario.
Wow.
That's the worst case.
I know my son, just last night, my son, he's 2 and he has to lay on my wife skin to skin. Like if he's laying on her, on her shirt, he's moving. And then when, she kind of pulls her shirt down, lets him lay his head on her neck or his face on her face, he has to touch her skin.
Yes.
SubhanAllah, man. It's crazy.
Yes. It is so important in allowing that child to have that space. And if mom can't do it, that's when grandparents will step in. Right. They're like, the baby needs it regardless. It's this book that I had to read for grad school called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. And one of the stories that it talked about was a woman's who she was a psychopath, not a killer psychopath. People get that confused. But she didn't have an interest in bonding with other people. So she didn't bond with her baby. And her baby was not gaining weight. It wasn't thriving. So they had to hire someone to come in and nurture the baby so that the baby could live.
Wow.
So it's so like those few, that first year is so, so, so important. So like, I understand that sometimes women might have trouble with breastfeeding. I get it. You might not make enough milk, but that's in the skin contact. It's very, very important with babies.
So let me ask you so we can jump into this conversation. What is childhood trauma, or what is ACE, adverse childhood experiences? What is childhood trauma?
So it's very complex in the sense that it's anything that happens that could be traumatic depending on who the child is, because different things could impact a child and not traumatize them based on environment, based on temperament, and based on the parent's response to the trauma.
Okay.
So if you have a child whose temperament is more neurotic, they're more likely to experience something and it become traumatizing to them. How we had neurotic children, not getting consistent reinforcements of who they are.
Give me an example of that.
Of the neurotic child, or consistent reinforcement?
Consistent reinforcement.
So with consistent reinforcements, children should be, like, so when they come to you to be like hugged, loved, slept with, or like in your wife's case, like wanting to put skin to skin, you have to allow that to happen. It makes them have a safe connection, a secure connection with their parent. When you have secure connections, they know that they can go back to their parent if something happens, and their parent is going to protect them, even if something already happened. That is important.
Right.
So, like, for example, I had posted something like children look to their parents for responses. So your house could get burned down, but if everyone is like, oh, I'm so glad that you're okay, come here, I know that was scary, let's talk about it, they're more likely to adjust well versus the one that be like, it's just a house, don't worry about it, stop crying, get yourself together. Like, those kinds of parents who don't validate a child's internal experience are more likely to become neurotic and very emotional. Because we have to teach emotional intelligence to the children.
Wow. So let me ask, so you define childhood trauma as, traumatic experiences that happen to children, in childhood, whether that is neglect, mental illness, abuse. So let's talk about some forms of abuse that a child could experience in childhood that would be categorized as childhood traumatic experiences.
So one of the things that you brought up was the ACE. Anybody can literally look it up. You can actually take the exam to let you know like how high your score is in average childhood experiences. Some of the things that it lists is domestic violence. It lists a parent being in jail. It lists not feeling loved by your family. It also lists, because like about 10 to 12 questions. So it lists a very different experiences. But with the ACE, what it's also measuring is the higher your score is, the more likely you are to have medical problems later in life and mental problems later in life. So you're more likely to die of a stroke, heart attack, cancer, you name it, you're more likely to develop it because of traumatic experiences that you have experienced in childhood.
Right. So in the Muslim community, if we had to relate this to the Muslim community, what are in your experience, what are some of the examples of childhood trauma or traumatic experiences that are happening to Muslim children within the Muslim community? Because we have a specific set of traumatizing events that happen. So what are, in your experience, some of the traumatic events that are happening to many Muslim children in the Muslim community?
The biggest one is the multiple marriages that we keep having. Not polygyny. I'm just talking about multiple marriages where you marrying one brother or one sister in succession and you keep bringing these people around your children.
Right.
Because what is happening is you're creating attachments and bonds and then you're ripping it away. And then because you are not talking to the woman or person that you introduced into your child's life who was taking care of them as a mother or father figure, then you're no longer letting them talk to them.
Right. So it's not just the marriages, the multiple marriages that are happening in succession. It is the multiple people that you are constantly introducing to your children. And then with those relationships, then when the divorce happens, or the separation happens, then you find that relationship is ripped apart, and then you're introducing them to somebody else, and then that relationship is ripped apart, and it's just happening over and over and over again.
That's the biggest thing that I see in people. And see, with children, they don't understand that it has nothing to do with them. They internalize everything. Oh, this person is gone because of me. Person is leaving because of me. I wasn't good. I wasn't bad. I mean, I would say I was bad. I was bad. I wasn't a good child. If I could have been better, then that person would have stayed. I really, really liked them. Now they're gone. I actually knew a guy who his child, every marriage that he had, would call them mom.
Mm.
That's not acceptable because our mind is a very strange thing. About 95% of our thoughts are unconscious.
Mm.
So the things that you are thinking about on an everyday situation, honestly, I tell people, like, I don't even care about that. I want to know what things that you're thinking that you don't even realize that you're thinking.
Mm.
Because of such conditioning that you have over time, you no longer have to think about any toxic behaviors because you're on autopilot.
You're on autopilot, right?
Yeah, so those children who grew up with, you see them successive marriages, remember, they internalize it. So then you might have a little girl grow up thinking that women are replaceable.
Mm-hmm.
So then they try to hang on to any relationship that they might have.
Mm-hmm. Regardless of how toxic it is.
Regardless of how toxic it is.
Right.
Or you might have a male who is, he is the one that's going through marriages, because that's what was modeled for him. Like, oh, this is what men do. Or, women are not respectable because, I've seen that this is how they should be treated.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So we have to keep in mind that every time you are doing something, you're modeling the behavior that your child is going to internalize. They're not going to listen to what you say. They're going to look at the behaviors that you're doing. And they're going to emulate that because you are their person.
Right. Right. So let me ask you, with the childhood traumatic experiences, what happens to those traumatic experiences? Well, before I do that, can you give me some other examples of childhood traumatic experiences that are happening to Muslim children in the Muslim community? So one you mentioned was like the serial marriages and children kind of being introduced over and over again to new people, having very little time to develop solid relationships with those people, and then divorce settles, and then they're being introduced to somebody else. What else do you see in the Muslim community that is creating, these averse childhood experiences?
Recording in progress.
Childhood sexual.
Say it again.
Childhood sexual abuse.
Childhood sexual abuse. And you do see that in the Muslim community?
Yes.
Okay, so and I'm saying that because there are a lot of Muslims who may be oblivious to this, that these things do happen even within the Muslim community. And that it doesn't mean that we're any less Muslim. It just means that we're more human. We're more part of the fabric of the culture that encompasses us. And we are not impervious to what is happening to everybody else around us.
Yeah, and I think that we have a double-edged sword because we're Black and we're Muslim. So we are told to be quiet. So I find that when I had people come into the practice and they're talking about the abuse that they have experienced in massages, I had one girl that she was talking about another child who was abused. And I'm like, can you tell me who they are? Because I'm obligated to report it. But This was in a masjid of someone who was in a senior administration. And so when I'm speaking to people about, the abuse, what people don't get to is that when children experience abuse, any form of kind of abuses, it actually starts, we call it a schema. So it informs you of what the world is, who God is, and who you are.
Oh, wow.
So sometimes you see people who are atheists, and we be like, oh my goodness, they're atheists. They don't believe in God. But then you ask them, well, where's your father? They're usually absent or abusive.
Wow.
We're not really looking at the bigger picture.
Hold on, stop for a second before you go, because I want to reiterate this to make sure that people are taking notes. You said when they have these type of traumatic experiences, it shows them who they are, who God is, and what the world is.
Mm-hmm.
Man, subhanAllah. So it affects the way that they see themselves. It affects the way that they interact with God. And it also affects the way that they interact with the world around them. So let's look at each one of those. So how would it affect the way that they interact with themselves?
So how they interacted with themselves, they may see themselves as worthless. They may start to see themselves that they should. So there's more schema work. So I'm trying to think about all the different schemas. So they may start thinking they're worthless. They might start thinking like no one listens to me, or they're going to say, I have to be there for everybody because nobody is there for me. They may start thinking, so we call it this, then if this happened, then it means that, then it means this is going to happen. So they may start, so we call it trauma reenactment also.
Oh, wow.
So basically what they're doing is they're like, because I'm this, I'm worthless, no good, or I have to be there for everybody. I have to save the world, or I am prey, because, you know, sometimes people think of themselves like that. So because they do, then they may develop ways in which to cope with it by acting out. So if I think that I'm prey and that the world is dangerous and someone's going to be out to get me, I got to get you first. And you see that mentality where, you know, you'll have people like, oh, if he cheated, it don't even matter because I already did it.
Right. So, all right. So that's okay. So for a woman, but for a man, so how would that affect his interacting with himself?
So with the schemas, it's usually the same. The only difference is the behavior may look different.
Okay. So with the men, what would that look like?
So with men, it may be the one that's like, oh yeah, I'm like, especially with men that think they're weak. You may see them like being a womanizer, like, oh, I can get this person, I can do that, and I can get this, or I can get that from women, and blah blah blah, because it tries to build their self-esteem so they can feel better.
So do you think that there are men in the Muslim community who go after multiple wives to kind of overcompensate for that feeling of inferiority or insecurity? Do you think that could, you know, be a reason for a lot of these? And I'm not talking about the brothers who marry multiple wives and do it in an honorable way and take care of the families. I'm talking about those who marry women in secret, those who, you know, are having a secret relationship with a woman and then they get caught and then they turn around and marry them to try to make it right. Or they marry, you know, I've seen brothers who tried to marry two wives on the same night.
A lot of times I find that men that do that are usually cowards. And in their own fear of standing in whoever they are. Like if you are someone who feel like polygyny is something that you want to do, because they are people pleasers, they may not say to their current wife, like, I want another wife. And then so they'll try to do it in secret out of their own fear, because they may have grown up pleasing everybody. You know, sometimes we think like, oh, he just was trying to do her dirty. It's not always the case, because I see it all the time where men will do that. And by no means do I think that it's because they are trying to be a womanizer. Most of the time it's just because of fear of losing what they have and not just being honest and open, like, this is what I want, because they put everyone else first, everyone's feelings first. Which is not a bad thing in and of itself, but when you start making decisions based off of feelings, that's a problem.
Why is that a problem?
Because feelings are not reality.
They're
your reality, but they're not reality. Because my feelings I tell people feelings are just information. They tell you what is important to you, or what makes you sad, or what makes you depressed, or what you're happy about. That's all feelings are. It's just information.
Right.
And then you make decisions based on logic. And you may allow your feelings to make a decision, or, you know, like help you and coach you into it, but not necessarily. Like I had a brother one time literally call out of work knowing that he's behind on bills because he was mad and he didn't want the person to babysit the kids. Like, that's a problem. Now, if you want to talk about your feelings, like I didn't like that you did X, Y, and Z, you know, with your wife because she was babysitting his kids. I get that. Have that discussion. Like I didn't like the way you made me feel, but don't make decisions based off your feelings.
So let me ask you. So are there any other traumatic experiences that Muslim children are experiencing in childhood that affects them in adulthood?
Being raised by single parent mothers.
Talk about it. Single mothers?
Single mothers.
Okay, talk about it. Why is being raised by a single mother, even within the Muslim community, why is that a traumatic experience for a child?
That is a traumatic. So it's not really necessarily. No, I wouldn't say parental alienation. What it is that when Muslim, because we love to think that women can raise, especially men. They be like, I can raise a man. You can't. But in general, children, right? And it goes back to feelings, right? Women are more feelings guided than the men.
What do you mean feelings guided?
I mean, they make decisions based off their feelings.
Okay.
And that's why we're not allowed to divorce our husbands.
Preach. Preach. I'm glad they're hearing it from a woman. Alhamdulillah. And that is the reason why Islamically divorce is in the hands of the man, because you know, and there are other reasons, but that's one of the main reasons that you pointed out, is that women make a lot of their decisions based upon how they feel.
Yeah. And so when you have a child, and again, women love to think that because they can identify their feelings, that means that they're emotionally intelligent. No. Listen, I'm quite sure dogs can identify their feelings. They know when they're sad. They know when they're happy. They know when they're angry. But it's what you do with them that's more important. And I'm not saying that men don't do it. Again, there's a lot of nuances to everything. I want people to understand that. And not saying that this is only a plight to only women. But in general, women are more likely to make decisions based on their feelings that could be detrimental to the family unit. It could be detrimental to their children. I've seen women talk so much stuff on their children's father, not realizing that children love their parents, right, wrong, or indifferent.
Right.
So when you do that, what it does is it makes them feel guilty about their feelings for loving their parents. Then they feel like they owe you an obligation or some loyalty. Or sometimes you just might be flat out lying. Let's just be real, because I've seen it over and over and over again. If you feel like you have your child's father is not that good of a man, your child will see it regardless. Allow them to experience it and go through it themselves. And you might think like, but that's traumatic. No, when you are there to be the soundboard, it still allows them to develop naturally, because it's called protective factors. Again, remember, children are going to respond based off their parents' response.
Right.
So if you're there to be a sounding board, regardless of what the other parent is doing, they still will grow up fine.
Right.
Because we have protective factors.
So let me kind of reiterate what you're saying. So you're saying that when a woman is a single mom is raising, and this is not an attack on single mothers. We understand that you guys are doing the best that you can with the cards that you were dealt. We understand that. Check. We don't want to make anyone feel like, you know, you're coming for my motherhood. What we're trying to do is to try to identify some of the kinks in our armor so that we can begin making better decisions, more healthy decisions, so that we can repair broken children so they don't have to become broken men, you know, or broken women, as in the words of Frederick Douglass. You know, it is easy to repair a broken child than it is to repair a broken adult, a broken man, you know. So when a woman is raising her children, sometimes the woman, maybe she doesn't realize she's doing it, or maybe she's doing it on purpose. But what you're forcing your child to do is to give loyalty to you, is to choose you over their father. And they love children. They love their father, especially girls. They adore their fathers. That's the first man that she experiences love with. And so for a woman to talk bad about the father in front of the children, or, to make gestures whereby the children can, understand from those gestures that it is a slight towards the father, you are unconsciously or consciously forcing the child to choose you over the parent, over the father. And that creates, within the child, this sense of shame and, embarrassment. So now when they're around the father, they can't fully embrace the father the way that they would if those ideas wasn't supplanted in their subconscious by way of comments that the mother makes, or gestures, And she said, rather than, doing that, let the child, if you feel like the father of the child is not being a good parent, then let the child see that for themselves. If the child is making promises that, hey, I'm going to come pick you up, and he doesn't come pick you up, you don't have to say to the child, see, your father ain't ish. He said he was coming to pick you up and he didn't come pick you up. When you start to notice that your child is standing at the door and he has his bags, or she has her bags packed, and dad doesn't show up, you can just look at their face and you can say, hey, come here. You want to talk? How are you feeling right now? How do you feel? And allow the child to express, and then just validate how they feel without, influencing their thoughts. You don't have to do that,
But what I would add as another gesture too is make excuses. And I'm going to tell you why.
Wow.
I'm going to tell you.
And that's actually part of our religion. Absolutely.
Yeah, you make excuses, because children, again, remember, childhood trauma influence how people view God, right? So you bring the other person back down to being a human. And say, hey, listen, I know your dad will pick you up. Something may have happened. Sometimes, like with my oldest son, father, he had real problems. So it's like, listen, everybody has problems. Hopefully he's going to get it together. I think that, we could all talk about like counseling or stuff like that, because what it does is it makes them realize that, okay, it's not about me, but also my dad is human.
Right. And that's actually part of our religion. In addition to what you're mentioning, the Prophet ﷺ said that the believer is the one who makes excuses for his brother or his sister in Islam. And the hypocrite is the one who looks for the flaws, looks for the mistakes. That is the characteristic of someone who is a hypocrite. Is that they look for the flaw. They look for the mistake. They're looking to pinpoint the flaws and the mistakes of the other, while the believer, in their mercy and compassion for one another, they are looking for the excuse. The Prophet ﷺ said, make 70 excuses for your brother. And even if you can't find an excuse, then make one up, because perhaps your brother has an excuse. So rather than saying, see, your father makes all of these promises and then never comes through on his promises, you can say, I don't know what happened. I'll find out what happened, but let's just make dua that he's okay, that everything is all right. I don't know what happened. I don't know why he didn't show up. But perhaps something happened. We don't know. I will look into it, but we don't want to paint him in the worst light. Very important. Very important. So you mentioned, 3 things so far of, negative childhood experiences that are specific in the Muslim community. And that is, the single mothers. That is, introducing the children through serial marriages, introducing the children to different, different people, and then not allowing those relationships to develop before you're introducing them to someone else. And there was one more you mentioned.
Oh, I got ADD bad.
It'll come to me. It'll come to me. Okay, and I mean we can go on and on and on with a lot of the childhood, traumatic experiences that are specific to the Muslim community. Now let me ask you, what happens with these childhood experiences when we become adults? Do these things just disappear because we've had some life experiences? And so these things happened to me when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. And now I'm 25, 26, 27. I graduated from college. I'm an overachiever. I'm doing great in life. I have a good job. I'm looking for marriage. What happened to those negative childhood experiences from the age of 12 all the way up to 26, 27 years old? Do they just disappear with life experience, or do we bury them? Are they in the back of our mind and our subconscious? What happens to these experiences? Because a lot of us reach adulthood after having had these experiences, believing that we are okay. I made it to adulthood. I'm fine.
I wish.
I wish.
So again, all those, I say, one of my things I say is behaviors are just stories that weren't able to be voiced. So
Whoa. Go back. Behaviors are just stories that have not been able to be voiced. What do you mean by that?
Yes. So now let's just say, for example, like I'll use myself, right? I had childhood sexual abuse. So you can have one where someone becomes very promiscuous, or you can have the other where they don't have no sex drive.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times what happens is there's no balance when it comes to trauma. So you'll see that. So when you start whenever you see someone become excessive in anything, it's something there.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's serial video gaming, whether that's pornography, even I know the letters community, LGBTQ, would probably kill me for this, but I have yet to meet one who has not experienced childhood trauma. Not one. And it doesn't necessarily have to be childhood sexual abuse. So a lot of times I've seen with women, when I see women who are participating in homosexual acts, usually I see that they don't have a good relationship with their mother. It's very toxic. And I believe, just my personal opinion, that it's because, so now they're in homosexual relationships because they want the mother figure. Same with men in that regard.
Hold up, go back. So you're saying when a woman is in a relationship with another woman, she's looking for her mother?
Mm-hmm. And men be looking for their fathers.
And
I can't tell you how.
But in what way? How does that translate? A woman being in a relationship with another woman, how does that translate her looking for her mother in that relationship?
Because it's looking for that foundational stuff that we missed. So that love, the attention, it's just we happen to be grown with sexual organs that need to be fulfilled. But right. I'm quite sure if we didn't have no sex, it still would be the same.
Right.
And with men who, I can't tell you how many times I'd be in there with a man who's homosexual, and I'd be like, can we start talking about the first man that you ever loved that abandoned you? And they just look at me and get mad. Well, they don't get mad, but because they have to address that. Let's address the neglect of your father. Let's address the abuse that your father has put onto you.
Right.
And or with transgenders, I've seen, I remember I was watching a video of a little boy who their parents had brought their son in because they're like, oh my God, he's saying that he's a girl. Mm-hmm. And instead of because we had this whole affirming stuff, and I'm glad that the therapist did this. She did not automatically say, oh, you're a girl. No, she said, well, what's going on? This little boy wound up saying, well, they love my sister, so I thought that they would love me more if I was a girl. And if you affirm it, you're affirming that this narrative.
The narrative, right. Right. So when a child says, well, I want to be identified not as a boy, as a girl, or I want to be identified as a girl, not a boy. And when you do that, basically society, our government, the laws that have been created to give them, to enforce this, we are basically affirming
Their trauma.
their trauma. Wow. How about that, man? How about
You're
that?
affirming.
So laws have been created and put in place. Even in school now, if a child says, I don't identify as a girl, I identify as a boy, or I don't identify as a boy, I identify as a girl, teachers are now obligated to call them by the pronouns that they want to be identified by. And by doing so, the teachers are now reaffirming those narratives that they are telling themselves in order to maintain that identity. It's an identity crisis, if you ask me.
Absolutely. And what people don't get too is that they think that by doing this is going to lower the suicide rates in the community. It has not. It has not, because how can you accept, because they want everybody to accept this delusion of what they're experiencing when you haven't accepted your reality of your experience.
Wow. So they want everybody to accept their version of that narrative when they haven't accepted the reality of their own narrative. So going back to my initial point, what happens to these averse childhood experiences, this childhood trauma? What happens to that as the person reaches adulthood? Do these experiences just disappear? Do these experiences integrate, with their life or their life experiences as they matriculate through life, as they go on through adulthood? Do these things, people always say, well, I'm fine. I'm fine now. I'm good. This happened to me in childhood, but, I've learned how to reconcile those things and I'm good now. What happens to these experiences?
It looks like addiction.
It looks like an addiction.
Yeah, depending on what the experience is. So, like, you have people who become workaholics. Then you have people who will use substances. You have people who become codependent, who become dependent. So it shows up like that inside relationships. And again, if you go back to the schema, it shows up with the whole, I view the world as a dangerous place. So what you'll do is you start operating like the world is dangerous.
Mm-hmm. But you're on survival mode. You're on survival mode all the time.
You're hyper-vigilant. You're being hyper-vigilant.
Yes.
Or you may become a hoarder, or you may become so generalized anxiety. I've never seen so many anxious people and depressed people in my life. And it's because we have given over to this whole idea that your feelings, because again, even though it's trauma and stuff like that, and you have a right to your feelings, when you give into that, it just births a whole new beast in adulthood. Because everybody's operating out of how they feel based on their experiences. Based upon their experiences. ADHD, all of those different kinds of things. Or, you have this whole idea of, I find, especially on social media, which I see so many people where they either so depressed and they don't even realize they're depressed because they're angry. And and people don't understand that anger, especially for men, is more likely to be depressed. And they just give everyone a whole new one based off of whatever experiences they happen, or they misinterpret information. So because trauma doesn't allow your brain to learn.
How does trauma affect your ability to receive information in a healthy way?
Because it's always filtered through your trauma.
It's always filtered through your trauma.
Absolutely. Always filtered through your trauma. So, like, for an example, you'll have women who, let's say, they're like I actually have a friend who's a man hater. Oh my goodness, it don't make no sense. I don't know what happened to her. She said she has a great father, but I doubt it. Somewhere along the line, something went wrong. But whenever I was watching, I don't know if anyone saw This Is Us, and one of the characters, she was like, oh my God, I can't stand him. He's being so mean to Kate, whatever his name is. And I watched what she was talking about. I said, he wasn't being mean. Like, I don't get what you're saying.
Right.
But her filter, everything is being filtered through men are dangerous.
Right.
Which again, there's always nuances. Obviously, like women need protection. Who are women being protected from? Men. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you got to operate in a way that's so fearful.
Right.
But your stuff is always filtered through your trauma. So you have to deal with it because it becomes, matter of fact, to give you a perfect example, like how your mind works, right?
Okay.
So because 95% of your brain, your thoughts are unconscious, think about when you're driving a car. And let's just say you drive from work home every single day, but you decide today you want to go to your friend's house that lives around the corner, but then you still end up at home. And you were like, wait a minute, I was supposed to be going to my friend's house. It's because your mind was on autopilot. It literally dissociated and just got you home because that's your norm.
That's your norm.
So when you have trauma and that's your norm, you operate in that the trauma is always happening.
Wow. So, man, subhanAllah, that's a lot. I hope you guys are taking notes. I hope you guys are focusing in and paying attention to this, because that means that a lot of our behaviors are pretty much autopilot behaviors. These are behaviors that are filtered through some of the traumatic experiences that we've had in childhood, and we don't even realize the pattern of behavior that is happening in our lives because those behaviors are constantly being filtered through our trauma. And it's just something that and maybe this will explain why a lot of brothers and sisters are constantly in and out of marriages, because we don't let me say something. If everybody is telling you the same thing, something is wrong with you, not everybody else.
Yeah.
And there are some of us throughout our entire lives, the same message has been repeated to us over and over and over again in different ways from different people, but it's the same message. And we tend to kind of dismiss that, thinking, blaming it on everybody else. No, it's this person's fault, that person's fault, or this person did this person did that. But if we were to go back and ask every single one of those people the issue that they had with you, each and every one, we will find a thread. We will find a consistency between what this person said, what that person said, what that person said. And then when we bring that back to, and when that's brought back to our attention, we find a way to dismiss it. But if everybody is saying the same thing, something about what they're saying has to be true. So if you've been married 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times throughout your marriage, and all throughout your marriage, everybody is saying the same thing about you, at some point, you have to take a deeper look at yourself. It can't be everybody else.
Yes.
But if you're on autopilot because your behaviors are filtered through your traumatic experiences, your delusion becomes your reality. What you are deluded by actually becomes your reality, but not the reality of everybody else around you. And I'm hoping that makes sense. So how does childhood trauma show up in many of our marriages?
That's exactly when they show up. Because when you're by yourself, it's just you. As soon as you get into a relationship, get into a marriage, everything starts to come out because you get to do what you do best, which is trauma reenactment.
Woo! Hold up. Don't go any further. She said that when you get into a marriage, that's when your trauma starts to show itself, because you are now reenacting all of the childhood traumatic experiences that you've had now in your marriage. Your marriage now becomes, the playground. Your marriage now becomes the playground where you get to now relive all of those traumatic experiences. So paint a picture for us how some childhood traumatic experiences show up in marriages. Paint a picture for us.
So I want to address something that somebody said that just showed up at the bottom. One of the things that, what if trauma showed up in the marriage? Let me tell you, it showed up way before then. And I'm going to tell you why. Because our trauma is so insidious. It's like a missile. It latches on to whatever you want to reenact. It may make it worse. Yes. But we as people, it's like our mind says, oh, there goes my trauma. I love it. I want you. Trust me. Usually, a lot of times it already was there when you met them, and your traumas met each other and was like, I like this. So say, for example, you get into a marriage and it was physically abusive, right? And again, some things are just correlations. So if you got into and it's physically abusive, you may have already witnessed emotional and mental abuse with your parents.
Right.
And so you're reenacting the trauma that you had already experienced, and then you're going to push it down to your kids. So just to give you an example, I had a woman show up and she was talking about how she felt like her mother chose her husband over her when he abused her. And so we talking, and I said, well, hey, I want to ask you a question. I said, so how do you think your son feels that your husband doesn't like your son and he's living with your mother? And she was like, I didn't even realize I was doing the same thing to my son.
Oh, wow.
And this is how our trauma keeps getting reacted. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're in it, but sometimes you might push it on to someone else, like your children.
Right. So for those of you listening, we're talking about how childhood trauma shows up in marriages, and marriage is basically the playground where childhood trauma has, the ability to, expose itself. And so she said, for an example, a woman has issues with her mom because she felt like her mom chose her husband over her. So later on, this woman gets married and her husband has issues with her son, and she sends her son to live with her mother, rather than, trying to help the father and the stepfather adjust, to the home and the home that she created with her and her son. So she chooses her husband over her son, the same way her mother chose her stepdad over her. So, it's kind of the trauma replaying itself out over again, and sometimes we're not even aware that we're doing this.
But what's even more interesting is, again, that's why I said a lot of times, even though you may feel like you experienced trauma in the marriage and it showed up then, the fact that she chose a man that literally did the same thing, that, again, it was something in him that she recognized unconsciously and wanted that.
Even before she married him.
Even before she married him.
So basically what you're saying is that people make choices in spouses based upon their trauma.
Yep.
Holy crap. My goodness.
Listen, I don't
goodness.
know. Listen,
hold on. Don't go past that point. Don't stop right
No,
there.
I'm not going to go past that point. I'm going to expound on that.
Go ahead.
I'll have people sit and then they're like, I don't know why I keep getting this same kind of woman. Because it's you. You are seeking that. You don't even realize it. Because I had a client where I had to walk through talking to her about a person, I was like, how do you know a man can't take accountability? She's like, I don't know. I said, well, let's talk about your courting process. Then you start talking about it. I said, well, when you said that to him, what did he say? He was like, oh, you crazy. That's already not taking accountability. Not necessarily meaning that everything was true, but at least seeing some part of it where you could be like, you know what? I think you're right. Let me adjust.
Right.
Or, you see the signs before then, but we try to act like we delusional. Or, women love to say, my favorite line that I hate, like, oh, I see, what is that thing that they say a lot? Oh God, they say, I see possibilities, or whatever that line is.
Potential.
Potential, yes. I said, they say I see potential. But what's the probability that that potential is going to manifest?
And manifest with you.
Or manifest with you.
The potential could be there, but that potential may not show up in his or her relationship with you. With you.
But what if I tell you it was never potential there, ever?
It was all maybe a figment of your own imagination. You wanted it to be the potential.
No. You know how people talk about we project negativity onto people? Mm-hmm. But what if we project our positivity onto people too?
What do you mean?
Meaning, I see in myself that I can be better, that I'm a good person. So I'm reflecting and projecting that onto you, that you can be a better person, that you want more for yourself also. And we project onto other people narratives that don't be true.
SubhanAllah. Wow. So let's go back to childhood trauma showing up in marriages. How does this show up in marriages? I mean, you're touching on some really, really important stuff. And, I'm hoping that everybody is listening and listening, attentively, listening with the intention of trying to be more self-reflective. Because I think for most of the people that are here, I know I've had childhood, traumatic experiences. When we talk about ACE, we're talking about adverse, childhood experiences. One of them is neglect. I was raised, in a foster home. So there was neglect there. There was neglect from both my mother as well as my father. And so right now I am an overachiever in anything that I involve myself in, because in being an overachiever, I'm trying to prove to myself that I'm not a failure, that I do matter, that I am, important, because my parents didn't show me that I was important. I am aware of my, so that's the difference. There's some people who are delusional, who believe that they're okay, or they might say, we all got issues, but okay, well, what are your issues? And they're not able to specifically identify their issues. But for me personally, I knew, and here again, looking at the statistics of children in foster care, they don't usually make it out of the foster care system. They usually go from foster care system to prison, or from foster care system to addiction, which ultimately leads to prison, or, murder, as a result of anger, as a result of unprocessed, anger and, rage, or whatever the case may be. So I'm aware of those statistics. So for me, I'm saying to myself, I'm an overachiever so I can beat the odds. I'm overachiever so I can prove to myself that I matter, that I'm worthy, even though my parents didn't show me that. So I'm trying to overcompensate, and I'm saying this to you guys, listening, like this is my traumatic experience, and I'm aware of that. I'm aware of my, ability to overachieve, to invest all of myself in this and in that. I'm aware of that, and that's the key here is awareness, to raise your awareness of your issues so that you don't bleed on somebody that didn't cause, the wound, that didn't inflict the pain on you. Being aware of your trauma, being aware of your issues so that you don't inflict that on other people that are in your life. You don't inflict that on your children. You don't inflict that on your spouse. You don't inflict that on the people, your friends, the people that are around you, because you are aware of it. And when someone brings it to your attention, you don't dismiss it. You don't, because it exists. You do that. You have a tendency to do that from time to time. And I think if we were to raise our awareness and stand in our discomfort and just accept that this is our reality, it makes it easier for us to accept, criticism, accept, when people bring these things to our attention, so we don't spend so much of our time deflecting and dismissing.
Yes. And when you also, I want to add on to that, is when you are trying to address something with someone, one of the things I like to say is, if it affects you, it is about you.
Whoa, say that again. Say that again. If it affects you,
it is about you.
MashaAllah. If it affects you, it's about you. What do you mean by that? Say that again. What do you mean by that?
For example, like I was talking to a friend and we was talking about businesses, and I was like, hey, well, why don't you do blah, blah, blah for your, I know you wanted to start your business, blah, 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 blah. So she said, I feel like you think that if I don't have a business that I'm not worth that much. Because I remember that time when you said on a post that you would rather have somebody be in a relationship with somebody who had their own business. So I said, okay. And she's like, well, I just feel like you think that about me. I said, did I say that? She like, no. I said, do I have friends that don't have businesses? She like, yes. I said,
because I don't care about you having one or not having one. I said, you said you wanted a business. And she was like, oh yeah, that is how I feel about, that's how you feel about yourself. I don't feel that way about you.
Right.
But sometimes we will project, again, our own feelings onto somebody else in the story that's happening. Again, just because you feel something doesn't mean it's real. So always check yourself first. Like, okay, I'm feeling sad about this. I'm feeling angry about this. Is what I'm feeling real? Or some of the things that I like to say, like if I feel some type of way about something, I'll tell somebody, I'm like, hey, this is how I feel, but I want you to know that just because I feel this way doesn't mean it's real.
Right.
But I just talk to you about it. And then if they say, no, I was like, okay. I'm like, just making sure like that wasn't what I was experiencing with you.
Right.
Or sometimes you just got to check yourself. Like, I know this is not what's happening. But also I wanted to, because I almost forgot, because I wanted to talk about like single mothers raising children alone.
Right.
And it being traumatizing, because I wanted to give people statistics, right? Over 70% of people that's in jail were raised in single parent homes. Men are more likely to be a predator when raised by a single parent mother. They're more likely to drop out of school. They're more likely to fail school, or, not finish or just fail. They're more likely to, oh goodness, what was it called? Like become murderers and predators, and like the statistics rise through the roof. Mm-hmm. But single parent men produces the same outcome as two parent homes.
Wow. Why is that? Why is it that when a child is raised by a single dad, he produces the same outcome as a child that is raised with both parents, in contrast to a child that is raised by a single mom who usually resorts to criminal behavior or, addictions, or, just kind of goes down that path?
Well, because women are nurturers and men are disciplinarians.
Women are nurturers. Sisters, I want you guys to listen. Women are nurturers for the most part. And we're talking about in your natural state. We're not talking about what you had to become as a result of, the circumstances that you found yourself in. Sometimes a woman has to be a nurturer and a disciplinarian at the same time. But that is not your natural role. Your natural place is to nurture. That's your natural place. And
but
it is, and men are disciplinarians naturally.
But the problem with women being disciplinarians, even if they have to put in that role, they're not as consistent as men are. Men are more likely to be consistent with the disciplines than women are.
And I'm sure that every man listening here will attest to that, including myself. Like, we take the cell phone, we take the device, and then our wives will come back to us and say, well, I think he was being a little harsh. Can you just give him back the cell phone? It's just like, I took the cell phone yesterday. Let him sit 48 hours. Let him sit for 2 days without a cell phone. And, here you come, in my ear trying to weaken me and soften me to give it back to them. And it's just like, we're never going to win. We're never going to get the kid to do what we want them to do if I set some rules for him and I discipline him in a certain way, and then you double back to try to soften the blow. We're going to always keep hustling backwards. And I'm sure every man here listening can attest to that.
And let's be honest, to make it in life, do you need to know feelings or discipline?
I think a little bit of both.
No. I'm saying if you had to choose when it comes to outcomes, right? I think when men raising them and they have consistent discipline, even if you don't learn to be emotionally intelligent, you can at least survive longer with discipline. I have to do this. 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 I got to make sure I do this. When you learn just emotions, that's all that matters.
You become a good negotiator. You learn how to navigate through life based upon emotions, but right, but you don't understand, discipline, and even leaning more too much towards emotion or feeling can also can be dangerous as well, because you're the type of person that takes no harshly. You don't understand that there's sometimes no is necessary. You don't understand that sometimes, you have to put your foot down and draw a line and set boundaries, because you're operating in the emotion part. Discipline is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, because guess what? If I'm emotional and I'm coming to the negotiation, I may not show up if I don't feel like it. But the disciplined person is going to show up.
So do you think that with the divorce rate in the Muslim community, do you think that is a traumatic experience for many Muslim children?
Absolutely. It's very traumatic. And even sometimes the way that it happens is very a lot. So I've seen men remarry their children's mother just to destroy them again.
Wow.
Or, intoxicants. And granted, I want people to know too, is that obviously, as a therapist, I'm seeing the worst of the worst. Obviously, like, people don't call me because they having sunshines and rainbows,
Right,
and
a good day.
Yeah, right. So I want people to know that in perspective, I am seeing like the worst of the worst case scenarios. But I find that the ending of the marriages be horrendous. It'd be horrendous. That no person should have to experience or witness, adult, let alone children, when people divorce. It's not the peaceful kind of, hey, I don't think this is working out. Let's go our separate ways. Let's talk about co-parenting. What would that look like? Or, hey, no, it's not like that. I've heard of like men sleeping with other men's wives and getting into, these toxic, nasty brawls. And then when they show up to me, I'm like, how did you get into any of this? But again, a lot of times it'd be feeling. Right. It can be a lot of feelings and emotions about stuff that we should not have been entertaining from the beginning, whether that's intoxicants, because a lot of Muslims have addictions that we act like we just sweep it under the rug, and now we tripping over our own rug. We just have to deal with these problems. And what we're really missing, I think that the biggest picture that's missing that can truly heal our community is actually having a real community.
What do you mean by that?
When I first, for example, when I first started this journey, I was collaborating with this sister about business stuff. And I'm like, hey, she said, oh no, I can't go there because I represent this particular masjid, and I want to make sure that I represent them well. And I was like, what does that have to do with the price of tea in China? We're Muslim. It's so much division in our community that it doesn't even make sense. Like, I thought we all was supposed to be following the Quran and Sunnah. And I get that, there's a differences in opinion and fiqh and stuff like that. I get it. But it should not be to the point that people are so divided and we talk so much negativity on each other. It's ridiculous. I said, we no longer have to wait for outside people to tear us apart because we're already doing it.
And what do you think that behavior comes from? Because that we didn't learn that behavior in Islam. So we can't attribute that behavior to Islam. What we do is we pathologize and we utilize, parts of the religion to justify much of that behavior, but much of that behavior was with us before many of us even converted to Islam or came into any level of consciousness. So where do you think that this divisive behavior, this insidious behavior, where do you think this comes from? Is this
Racism.
stemming from our trauma?
Of racism. And it starts from racism that we have internalized over generations and generations and generations. And it has creeped into our homes, to the, how it's the house nigga and then the field nigga. That's how we're acting. We're just doing it in Islam. So it's like, oh no, you're on the out, we are on the in. And what they don't understand is this is impacting our children. Because our children need a community. You don't survive without a community. Again, talking about the woman who hormones may be all over the place because they just had a baby. When you have a community, that's what everybody knows. So let's say even if you don't have grandparents, your neighbor can come over and say, hey, let me help you with the baby. Let me help you with some household chores. I know you're doing this or you're doing that.
Right.
We're so quick to attack each other, and our children are watching. And when you attack people that look like you're attacking them too.
SubhanAllah. So the lack of community, the lack of support, and there's a lot of that going on. So how do we begin to address our childhood trauma? Do we have to first identify what particular childhood trauma is troubling us before we can begin, or is there some general place that we can start?
Yes. So I have general places that people can start with. One is I tell people, like, if you are Black and you live in, this cold region, start with some supplements. And the reason why I say that is because some mental health disorders and stuff actually may present itself because of deficiencies. So like you may feel like you're depressed, but you might have a vitamin D deficiency. So I always tell people go to their primary care physician, get a full workup, blood work, all that kind of stuff. So get a multivitamin plus a vitamin D. So not just, also if you have anxiety, ashwagandha root is very helpful in that. Zinc helps with focus, and omega-3 fatty acids helps heal your brain, because again, when you go through trauma, it literally rewires your brain and it affects your central nervous system. So we need to get that back on track and help you to rewire it. Some of the things that you can do is
hold on, stop there. Let me just itemize these for everybody that's listening. So we're talking about addressing childhood trauma in adulthood. Without going into any of the specifics, there's some general places that you can start. Number one, with your health. Start with your health. And that is that everyone, if you haven't been to the doctor recently, then make you a doctor's appointment. Get a full blood work and to find out what you are deficient in. If you are deficient in vitamin D, vitamin E, you're deficient in any of these particular areas, then perhaps you can, take some type of supplement, daily supplement regimen that you can create. You can reach out. I had Brother Mikael on here last year during Ramadan, and he talked about, what he did was he took a box, I think, of Cheerios, or was it Apple Jacks, and he crushed it all up, the whole entire box, until it was just a bag of sugar. And, he poured it out, and he said, when you eat cereal, you feed this to your children. This is exactly what you're feeding to your children. Just a bowl of sugar, sugar with milk. So we have to go back, we have to go back to, the things that, that make us whole, and that is having good health. So taking maybe some vitamins, some daily supplements, if you are deficient in, zinc, if you're deficient in omega-3 fatty acids, you're deficient in vitamin D, your blood test will tell you all of that. And these things affect your brain function, your body, you're tired, your ability to process, your ability to, retain and understand information. This is all important.
That's underwear. My other clothes are.
Yeah, she's been removed. Okay. All right. So number 2, what's your number 2?
So number 2, if you are struggling with insecurities, because a lot of, again, remember, children always internalize any kind of trauma that they experience. I tell clients to write letters to their parents. You don't necessarily have to give it to them. Just write the letter. One, it's going to feel like a burden is weighed off you from writing it. But if you want to go a step further, let's just say you don't have, you can't afford therapy services or whatever. I always tell people to go through the letter, and anything negative that you are assigning to yourself, to rewrite it in a more realistic, appropriate way. So like if you were abused and you started talking about how you was a bad child and you was afraid of, no, scratch that out. Say, I was a child doing, normal childhood things and you abused me. And the reason being is because, again, your mind makes associations, right? So if you unconscious, because when you write letters, your unconscious starts to seep out a little bit, not full blown, but a little bit. And you can start to restructure your own narrative of what you believe about yourself. That's so important to do that.
Yes, I believe that is very powerful. I'm always encouraging brothers and sisters to learn the art of writing, especially for men, because we don't usually talk about our issues. We don't usually verbalize, what we are experiencing. We internalize everything, which is not healthy. So we have to have an outlet, and an outlet, I remember just the past conference that we just had, and I was talking to Imam Akil Ingram and Imam Ali Davis. We were having a conversation, and we were talking about, I think one of the brothers has said, I'm just kind of like out of the loop right now. I'm not really fully in it, as a student of knowledge. And you go through that, coming back to America, trying to reacclimate yourself back to society, trying to find your place. And I said to the brother, I said, you have to find your niche. I said, I was there at one point trying to find out where I fit in, where am I at, where I can operate at my peak performance. And I said, you'll find that. He said, yeah, but it's kind of affecting, my khutbahs, it's affecting my writing. And I said, for me, that is when I write the best. I do my best khutbahs when I am in pain. I pour all of my pain into my khutbah, my lecture. So when you see me and I'm like animated while I'm giving a lecture, it's probably something that I went through or something that, some childhood experience that sometimes they kind of regenerate. They come back up to the forefront of your mind. You might forget it, compartmentalize it, but then something may happen. You may hear something, see something, and it triggers that experience and it comes from the back to the front of your mind. So as I'm talking, I'm processing everything, but I pour all of my pain. A lot of musicians do it. We all know Mary J. Blige. She does her best work when she's in pain. Unfortunately, that's the double-edged sword with that. But you have to learn how to take your pain and pour it into, something that will allow it to be an outlet for you. And I think for men, writing is something that is very important. It becomes an outlet for us, to write out that pain. You don't, as you said, you don't necessarily have to give it to the parent. You don't necessarily have to give it to the person that, caused the trauma that you are experiencing, but you have had, helps you to have some type of closure because you have now had the ability to articulate what you are actually experiencing, what you're feeling. And it gives you an opportunity to control the narrative. As you said, you don't have to write it in a negative way or, a self-demeaning way, but you get to write it in a way where you are communicating your emotions, your feelings, without making yourself look like you are the victim.
Also, you can do, one of my favorites is, so we call it bilateral stimulation. So that the easiest way, obviously, is just walking and thinking about whatever trauma you have. Because when you experience trauma, it actually gets stored in the back of your brain, which is the animalistic part of your brain, which is why they become behaviors. Because that's where all of the memories and stuff get stored.
Wow. Okay.
And then once you get triggered and say, so this is how it's happening. So it gets stored here. The trauma gets stored here. You get triggered. So it starts to come out as behaviors. The part of your brain that makes the decisions go offline completely, and you act out.
Wow. Wow.
So when you go and you do walking, which is bilateral stimulation, it helps integrate the memory into both hemispheres parts of your brain.
Wow.
So that you won't continuously act the issue.
So let me go back over that one more time. So you said when you have a traumatic experience, you store that experience in the part of the brain where right, the left side of the brain that allows you to process emotions, feelings, and actions, what they call your animal brain, your reptile brain, and that triggers,
and it gets bigger.
It triggers behaviors without you being able to access, the rational side of the brain. And so this is why we act out. This is why when we have arguments with spouses, we have disagreements, we feel like we're not being understood, rather than trying to explain that, this is not what you meant, you act out, you raise your voice, you punch a wall, because that's the reptilian part of the brain that is responding, not the rational part of the brain that's responding.
Yep. So then you just act it out. So bilateral stimulation helps. Walking is the best. If so one of my favorite things to do is when I get upset about something, I was like, let me go take a walk. And I'll just leave. But I let the person know. Don't just abandon the person that you having a confrontation with, because that can incite like you don't care, blah, blah, blah. You may like, I have to calm down. Let me go take a walk. Now that takes skill. It takes practice. It doesn't happen overnight, but that's something that you can start implementing that will help you calm down much quicker and start to make this frontal lobe of your brain come back online so that you can talk it out. And
going for a walk helps to stimulate the rational side of the brain, so you can begin using both of them simultaneously.
Yeah.
Rather than you sitting in this uncomfortable place and just reacting to, the trigger.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So writing, walking, focusing on your health, getting the vitamins that you need. These are all practical things, man. Alhamdulillah. All right. You gave us 3. Give me 2 more, and then we'll open up the floor for question and answers.
So another thing that you can do to help you, like with whatever traumatic experiences that you are going through, is I have this thing called, and honestly, you actually can get it online. And the reason why I like it is because it helps you access unconscious thought processes. It's called YSQ form. Now, the reason why I'm saying it is because practically you can use it to see what kind of unconscious thought processes that you might already have that you don't even realize. Like, so some of the statements are like, I didn't have love and affection when I was growing up. Or it might ask you statements like, I feel like if someone asks, if I tell someone to do something, they should do it immediately. Like it has like different statements that you can start realizing like, wait, I do feel like when I tell people that they should do something, that they should do it. That's why I have a hard time with hearing no. And now I'm angry, but I don't know why that makes me angry, but that's practical stuff that you can start identifying so that you can change your thought process, help change those underlying beliefs so that you can have a more healthier relationship with other people by changing some of those belief systems. And lastly, my favorite, just get help.
Get help. What about spirituality? Does spirituality kind of help? Some people say prayer is my psych ward. Prayer is my therapy. Is prayer enough in your opinion?
So it's not enough. And I know people might be like, oh my God, why is it not enough? You know, the law is going to help me. Well, you got to do something. You can't just say, just like if I told you, like, okay, go pray, go make 2 rakats and ask the Lord for $1 million and then sit on your bed and see if you get it.
Right. So even after you make dua, and I'm glad you said that, even after you make dua, you still have to do what is necessary to bring the dua into fruition. So it's not just sitting on your hands. Even if we said, okay, go pray, go make dua, that's still not enough. Give me 1 second.
But while he's going, what I do like about prayer is meditation. Meditation is known to heal, like literally heal you.
Right.
So even with prayer, you definitely can get a lot of healing through prayer.
Right. For your personal, for your heart, for your spirit, your soul, yes. But prayer is not, it's just not enough. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim, that Allah will not change the condition of a people until at first they change what is within themselves. Meaning there has to be an initiative from you that has to start within you. And it's not, prayer, I think, is just the easy route out to say, I'm just going to pray on it, or I'm just going to make dua. That's the easy route out because it doesn't really require much. You just make wudu and go pray 2 rak'ah. That's simple. That's easy. And I think that we're always using religion for the easy route out. It's like, I get angry at somebody and, I say, oh, you're a disbeliever, or you're a non-Muslim, or you're an innovator. That's the easy route out. It's easy to get mad at a Muslim when you have a disagreement and say, oh, you're a person of bid'ah, you're a person of innovation. Why? Because once you do that, you don't have to have a conversation with them. You don't have to have a conversation anymore. You've already concluded that this person is astray, this person is a deviant, this person is not practicing Islam correctly. And as a result of that, I don't necessarily need to have a conversation with you. But when you take that name calling, when you take that off the table, it forces you to have a conversation with the person to come to a mutual understanding that, hey, you see it this way, I see it that way, and that's that. But when you label someone and you utilize the religion to justify that, then it takes having a conversation off the table. And it's the easy route out. And we use the religion all the time to take the easy route out. When we are in a dilemma, we're having a misfortune or something, we say, I'm just going to make dua. I'm just pray on it. That's it. You're just going to pray on it. You're not going to do anything. You're not going to do it. As I mentioned about the Battle of Badr, which started as a result of the Prophet ﷺ encouraging the Sahaba to go get their merchandise back. When the Muslims left Mecca and migrated to Medina, many of them, they left their homes, they left their businesses, they left everything. And 2 years after being into Medina, the Prophet ﷺ gets word that a caravan was going from Mecca to Syria to Damascus to go trade. And the Prophet knew that is the Muslims' merchandise that you're trading in Syria. That's not yours. And so as the caravan is coming back, going back towards Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ tells the Sahaba, it wouldn't be a bad idea for you to go seize the caravan and go get your stuff. He didn't say go make dua that Allah will return your stuff to you, or go make dua that, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you better with more than what you left in Mecca. He told them, go get your stuff. And as they go to try to seize the caravan, this is where the war ensues. And this becomes the first battle in Islam, known as the Battle of Badr. You know what I mean? So it's not just sit there and make dua. Even before that battle, the Prophet ﷺ was raising his hands, making dua so high that his cloak fell off of his shoulders. And so therefore he's bare-chested, nothing. And he has his hands up before the battle, making dua. And Abu Bakr comes to him and takes his cloak, puts it back on his shoulders and says, Ya Rasulullah, Allah heard you. Let's go to war. Allah heard you. You're doing all this prayer. I got it. You are the messenger of Allah. Allah is going to respond to you. But let's go to war. Let's go. Because you can pray all day long, but you have to also, coupled with prayer, coupled with dua, there has to be action, practical action. You know, so when someone asks, when you say get help, what does that mean? Are you talking about, therapy, speaking to a therapist? Are you talking about, like, what type of help are you talking about when you say that?
So I mean a couple things. One, mentorship.
Mentorship. Right? Okay.
Yes, because a lot, like, listen, I believe I'm an amazing therapist, but there's certain issues, especially when it comes to men, I can't help you with.
Why? No, you standing in your truth right now. Preach. You said that you believe that you are a great therapist. And I love the self-affirmation. I love that. Never down yourself, never play yourself as inferior or insecure. You said, I believe that I am a very thorough therapist, but there are some issues when it comes to men that I am probably not the best person to talk to. Why?
I'm not the best person to talk to about is because I don't know what it's like to exist in a space as a man, as a leader in a household. I know what it means to lead, but I don't know what it means to lead a family. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what it means to be emotionally intelligent for a man. I may know what a generalized emotional intelligence, but when it comes to being a man, I mean, I know how I want to feel when I'm with a man, but that's how I feel being with you.
Right.
But I don't know what it takes or what thought process it takes for that to be idealized into the real world.
So you think that a man would have to speak to a male therapist rather than a female?
I think I can help you. Matter of fact, I know I can help you when it comes to the trauma that you may have experienced. But when it comes to transitioning into letting go of that and becoming a man, that's something that's the journey. It ends there. I can't help you there.
So mentorship, men need to find another men, and this is especially true for younger men, to find an older male, an older Muslim male that you can kind of latch on to, for guidance, for for advice. It doesn't mean men. Let me tell you something Brother Hassan Clay said to me. And I was one of those men who always thought, man, I'm not going to know another man about my problems. That makes me feel like I'm less than a man. And I remember one time Hassan Clay, he said to me, he said, well, Shadid, a doctor cannot assess his own self. Like, a doctor needs a doctor. You do know that, right? And I was like, man, I never even thought about it like that. He said, a doctor needs a doctor. Doctors have doctors. A doctor goes to see another doctor. Does that mean that he's any less of a doctor? No, it doesn't. It just means that sometimes you are not equipped to assess your own issues or address your own issues. And you need help outside of yourself. And from that day all the way up into this moment right now, Brother Hassan has been a mentor to me. I call him at times, hey, you got a minute? I need to bounce something off you real quick. This is where I'm thinking. This is where I'm at. What do you think about that? And he might say, nah, Shadid, I don't think that's a... And as I'm talking to him, I'm not talking to him as Imam Shadid Muhammad. I'm talking to him as a younger man who's talking to an older man who has had some experiences in life that I have yet to have. You understand? I'm not talking to him. We got to be able to step outside of these titles that we give ourselves. Because as long as you see yourself as Zafirah, the therapist, who's a thorough therapist, then you're never going to be able to humble yourself to be able to talk to someone else, an older woman who may not be a therapist, but has some life experiences, have some wisdom that she can be able to, impart upon you, and you can benefit from. We have to be able to separate ourselves from the titles that we carry. Otherwise, we'll never be able to learn from one another. Imam Ahmed, who was younger than Imam Shafi'i, but Imam Shafi'i said that Imam Ahmed was his sheikh. And Imam Shafi'i was a lot older than Imam Ahmed. When Imam Ahmed's trial started with, the trial of the Quran being created and him being in prison, Imam Shafi'i died a little bit before that, right before that. And he saw that happening in a dream, and he sent a message to Imam Ahmed to inform him. But that was his sheikh. He identified Imam Ahmed as one of his shuyukh. Even if you look at the Imam Shafi'i's biography, it'll say from the scholars that he took knowledge from was Imam Ahmed, who was a lot younger than he was. And these are scholars. And it didn't mean that he saw himself as any less of a scholar because he took knowledge from somebody who was a lot younger than he was. You know, Imam al-Bukhari the same way. Imam al-Bukhari was a lot younger than even his own shuyukh. And many of the students, they would take from Imam al-Bukhari Sheikh, and they would also take from Imam al-Bukhari as well. So, you know, we have to be able to separate ourselves from the titles that we carry, you know, so that we can benefit and draw benefit from the people that are around us. Okay, so I want to give an opportunity for people to ask questions. So I'm going to start with those who are on Zoom. If you have a question, you can unmute your microphone. You have 60 seconds to ask a question. Please do not utilize the time to give your own lecture. If you want to confirm something that she said that you agree with, fine. But we don't need a whole soliloquy. We don't need, you know, a reiteration of the lecture. State your question, state your comment so that we can give other people an opportunity.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
My question is about gaslighting. You said that women are emotional and that is not the reality. However, how do they respond to what they know about feelings of being gaslit when the male is constantly saying, oh, no, I didn't do that. And it's like, but my feelings, it gotta be right. Then you're it feels like kind of enabling him to, if you ignore that feeling, to continue to gaslight you and manipulate you. And you're just feeling crazy, i.e. gaslit.
Yes.
How do you differentiate?
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So absolutely. So gaslit, you know, your feelings are valid for you. Absolutely. And like I said, feelings does not necessarily always mean that it's reality, but your feelings is still based on something that happened. So even though you may I feel like this happened, but did it happen? If that makes sense. So that's a part of the whole gaslighting process, is that they utilize your feelings to gaslight you because they know you're not going to think logically. I'm not going to say logically. I'm going to say rationally about it. So for example, let's just say he cheated, right? And he's like, I know you cheated on me. Well, you don't know that because, you know, you just feel that way. And they try to use your feelings to make your frontal lobe go offline because, again, it starts to activate the amygdala, and then so you start to feel crazy because you can't stop and think. So even if they be like, oh, that's not how you feel, just pause and say, okay, but what happened was, this is the reality. You did this, you said this. If that makes sense for you. Because people who are masters at abuse, they use feelings to manipulate and gaslight you.
Yeah, it makes sense what you said.
Yes. Okay. So no, your feelings are valid for you. Absolutely. But
So you just have to have proof of that old, I think, Shaggy song, It Wasn't Me.
Yes, absolutely. Now, women, we're more emotional, and we start to learn our husbands and stuff like that really, really well. So we be like, I feel like, but it doesn't mean that it's real. Especially if it's from previous trauma, because again, we start to reenact our trauma. So if something seems similar to something that we already experienced, we might accuse the person that we are with of something that's not happening based off of previous experiences of how we felt before.
Absolutely. So it's very important that we understand feelings are just that, feelings. Feelings, because you feel a certain way about something that somebody did or something somebody said, that doesn't mean that that's exactly what is happening. And for men, sometimes, you know, I think that we get caught up in when a woman says, oh, it seems like you're doing this. And it's like, yeah, but that's not what I'm doing. You know, and so in that moment, rather than dismissing the whole idea, you know, validate the feeling. This is something that I teach in my course, How to Get Married and Divorced in 10 Weeks. Validate the emotion I'm sorry, the divorce remedy course. It's a 5-week course. Validate the emotion, but you don't necessarily have to justify the action. So if your wife says to you, you did XYZ, this is the way it made me feel, you're making me feel like, you don't value me, whatever the case may be. Don't say, well, how does that make you feel like I don't value you? Of course I value you, but you know what I mean? And then you go on to try to justify the behavior. Rather than doing that, you validate the emotion. You make the person feel like, okay, you are having that emotion. I do understand how me doing this could make you feel like that. That validating that emotion lets the person know that they're not crazy. Because that's what gaslighting is to make you believe that the experience that you are having is only a figment of your imagination. It's not real. Mm-hmm. That's what gaslighting is. So rather than dismissing the emotion, you can validate the emotions to say, hey, I do understand how me doing this or saying this could make you feel like that. And I do apologize. That's number one. You validated the emotion. You let the person know that I understand you feel like that. You don't have to agree with the feeling. You don't have to make sense of the feeling. You don't have to say, well, I don't see how you can feel like that when I did. You don't have to, logically, understand that. It's not for you to understand. It's that person having the experience, not you. Explain that, hey, that wasn't what I meant by that. I'm sorry if it made you feel like that. I'll be more mindful of that moving forward. And these things, and once we learn the art of this, relationships become so much more simple. Not easy, but simple. Fixes are simple. As I say, that the difference between an experienced couple and an inexperienced couple is not the absence of marital problems. It's the tools that we use to solve the problem in a quicker fashion, more expeditiously. A couple that is inexperienced, they don't have the tools. So the problem lasts longer because they don't know how to solve it. But an experienced couple, they can put out the fire very quickly and get back to the the pre-conflict stage. They can get back to the pre-conflict stage very quickly because they have the tools to put out the fire very quickly. Okay, so we'll go to another question. Is there any other questions on the Zoom? You can go ahead and just unmute your microphone and ask your question.
Oh, yes, I have a question. My name's Fatima. Assalamu alaikum. I'm a little sick. So I just want to know, where are you located? Because we're going to need a good Muslim therapist. When money is free, we're going to need a serious therapist. So yeah, where are you located?
I'm located on 1515 Market Street in Philadelphia, down Center City. You can also go to my website. I'll put it in the chat, www.wfmmh.com. And you can always schedule through my portal also.
Okay, so if you guys go ahead and put it in the chat so everybody in the Zoom can find you, inshallah, your email, your website. So everybody that needs to get in touch with you, inshallah ta'ala, we want to make sure that we make our resources available. Sister Zafirah is a resource for us in the community, much like many others in our community. Sister Sharia, I saw her in here, who also is a resource in our communities. Brother Hassan and Naila, there's so many others. And my job is to try to not to know everything, but to know everybody that knows everything. So I want to make everybody available. I want to make these resources available. Sister Zafirah, if you have access to Facebook, can you go on to my Facebook page and post the same, your website as well as your email? There are people on Facebook that are asking for that. Are there any more questions? It's 8:50. We're going to push to 9 o'clock. So we got 10 minutes left. We don't want to take up any more time. It's Sunday. Kids got to go to school tomorrow. I haven't even eaten dinner yet. Nonetheless, I want to make sure. We don't want to take up any.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khairan. You guys, this was really, really insightful. I just had a question. I posted in the chat way earlier. Sorry for my daughter in the background. I wanted to know, sister, you mentioned before marriage, that trauma shows up even before that. And usually we have to, I'm sorry, usually we have to, I'm very sorry. Very sorry. Okay, I'll just get to my question. I want to know that, is it possible for someone to hide it so you cannot indicate it? Like a person can just cleverly hide it, and you can't really see that because they're hiding it from you, like the trauma.
So they absolutely can, but usually that's personality disorders. So that's a whole like another topic. So if they have like narcissistic personality disorder or psychopathic or sociopathic tendencies and things like that, yes, they absolutely can hide it. We have serial killers who were married, and they were neighbors and no one noticed. But it's usually the extreme personality disorders that can be hidden for longer periods of time. And the reason being is because they learn, because they don't have empathy. So they learn how to basically fake their life. And they've been faking their life all their life. So they know how to do that. But normal, every average Joe who would like have trauma and stuff like that, no, that's not usually the case. People want to be known. Like, that's one of my favorite things. Like, people want to be known and they will show you who they are. You just have to allow them to do it. So, and the reason why I say allow them is because what we'll do is I always tell people, like, and when it comes to like the marriage courting phase, right? We love to tell the other person what we like, which is great, but you really shouldn't, because what they're going to do is everything that you like to love bomb you. And then you end up in a situation like, they started off so sweet. I'm like, yeah, because you gave them the blueprint to your heart so that they could start abusing you.
Right. Can you say that again? I want the sisters to pay attention. And the fact that she's saying this as a woman, and this is something that I have been saying for the longest, and this is why it's important to always have a wali present. I actually just gave some advice to a sister just about a month ago. We had a meeting, we had a session, and she said, and I said, let me give you some advice. I said, never tell a man the things that you like or the thing, because he's going to use that against you. Don't do that. The whole objective of a sit down is for you to say less and get the other person to do most of the talking. Because the more you talk, the more you are giving the person ammunition to use that against you. The more you get the other person to talk, the more you can listen and, decipher what the person is saying to make an informed decision. But we like hearing ourselves talk so much. We like to talk so much. You know what I mean? Like, use wisdom, hikmah, and not saying much and asking a lot of questions. But if you're the one doing all the talking, the person is just like, oh, you like that? Oh, really? That's what you like? Oh, you wouldn't do that? Oh, okay. And they have in their mind the puzzle that is you. Got you figured out? Got you clocked. And this is especially for someone who is a sociopath.
Mm-hmm.
Sociopath, they're going to use you, they're going to abuse you, and they're going to toss you away, and then they're going to turn around and do it to somebody the very next day. So, can you say that again, Sister Zafirah?
Yes. So don't tell people what you like. Honestly, even with asking questions, I always tell people, be wary even of the questions that you ask, because they make cue. Because listen, you got to remember, people who are sociopaths, they study humans to know how to trick them into believing whatever story they have. Sometimes even the questions that you may ask may cue them in on things that you like. So even be wary of how you ask questions or formulate questions. Me being a therapist, I just let them talk. I love it. I'm like, go ahead. I might ask them like, whoa, so how that make you feel? I just let them just go. And eventually they'll tell you. People want you to know who they are. They will tell you. Even a sociopath, you just have to pay attention.
Have to pay attention. Okay, we have one question from the Clubhouse. I don't know. I'm gonna go ahead. Jade, you have a question? Sister Jade, do you have a question? Okay, guess not. Sister Shay, you have a question?
Yes. You spoke about childhood traumas. Obviously, that's what it's about. Can you just elaborate or highlight the difference in a woman having a male figure, a father, and the difference between her choosing a mate and a woman who doesn't have a dad? For example, I don't know how to word this, but I had a father growing up, so I had the best of both worlds, right? And I have the male understanding as well as the innate female stuff. So I look at the world, I look at things differently than maybe, from my experience anyway, I'm no doctor or anything, from women who did not have dads or male or positive male figures and in decision making as adults. Does that play a role in the choosing of a spouse and being able to see things?
Absolutely. Because again, like goes into the whole idea and premise of trauma reenactment, right? So when you don't have a father and so they're absent, so either 1A, you look at men like they're never going to be there, so I'm going to push him away, or you will find a man who will abandon you and you try to hold on and stay by any means necessary. And then so you'll see these women who find a man who they have to take care of. And they'll have to do everything for them like they're their son. Mm-hmm. So having a father figure in your life is important because, again, your father is going to teach you how men are supposed to treat a woman through how he treats your mother. But also your father teach you about how you're the little princess and how you're amazing. Because one of the things that I hate, and I'm just going to tie it in, is when people say, oh, you got to build your self-esteem. Self-esteem starts before you become an adult. It starts from your parents. Your parents instill esteem into you. I call it others' esteem. Because how you view yourself as an adult comes from childhood, and who pours it into is your mother and your father. If they are absent, it's going to be problematic.
Yep. Okay, alhamdulillah. So we're going to wrap this up. We're at the 9:00 hour. I wish I could continue this conversation. Hopefully, inshallah, we'll try to arrange another meeting where we can just have people ask questions. I think this is necessary. It was healthy. You brought up a lot of great points. I'm looking in the chat and seeing people kind of itemize a lot of the things that you spoke about. And I pray that there's some benefit. I pray that this is a contribution to the healing process for us as a community. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. We're living in an environment that is very toxic. It's the environment that we live in that is extremely toxic. America is an extremely toxic environment, and you don't realize that until you move to another country and live somewhere else, and you start to look at your own space where you come from as, man, because I can tell you, when living in Saudi Arabia, even for the short time that I moved to the UAE, I did not want to come back. I had survivor's remorse living in those environments, because I felt like, how did I, come up as a disbeliever, convert to Islam? Allah gave me the opportunity to go overseas and study Islam. I understand the people. I understand the culture. I understand the language. How is it that I can take my family and retreat to some remote country, live in that remote country, problem-free, drama-free, with all of the Islamic information and knowledge that I have acquired, and not come back and, join the struggle and deliver that message to the people who need to hear it the most? I suffered. I'm telling you, I could not enjoy my life overseas. And that is why I came back. And, it's rough. It's rough. This environment is toxic, from the way that we're reared, from the laws that, are imposed on us, to the images that we see every day of, black men being murdered, women being killed. I mean, you know, the violence, you know, everything. And I mean, you have to think about it. Like, soldiers who go to war and experience murder and violence, you know, and hear bombs and shooting, they experience post-traumatic, you know, stress syndrome. And you have to think, like, living in environments like Philadelphia, living in environments like New York, living in environments like Newark, New Jersey, living in Camden, these type of environments, you don't think that many of us suffer from PTSD? Man, we got it in the worst way, man. Traumatized. Just let a loud noise go off and watch the reaction. Watch the reaction. I remember, you know, being in Brooklyn a couple of years ago. We were in Brooklyn, and me and my wife were sitting at the car, and the kids in the back seat, and we're at a red light, and there's a basketball court right across from us as we're sitting there at the red light, and guys just start shooting at each other in broad daylight at the basketball court. Pop, pop, pop. I'm looking straight ahead, but I heard the shots, and you know, my wife she's shell shocked. You know, she's shocked. I pull off, run the red light. My wife's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "They're shooting. Bullets does not have names on it. Bullets don't." And these guys, they're not trained shooters. This is a young guy who just goes and buys a gun from somebody. He doesn't know how to shoot. He's never been to the range. He doesn't know how to aim. He doesn't know how to shoot the target exactly where he needs to hit it. He's just aiming recklessly. Bullets don't have, you know, names. They don't have targets. You know, so, and I mean, I'm traumatized because my response was a trauma response. I ran the red light. I just pulled off, you know what I mean? Because God forbid one of those bullets hit me, you know, or hit one of my children. So, I mean, you got to think, just living in an environment like that where gunfire could erupt anywhere at any given time. We're constantly living on edge. And then here we are trying to operate with this beautiful religion of Islam, you know, trying to get married and have healthy relationships with our wives and our husbands and our children, you know, and we're surrounded by toxicity, you know. It's you know, it's amazing that anybody can be Muslim in these environments, man. It's amazing that we hold on to Islam in these environments, you know. So, you know, I'll leave you guys with this, man. Be merciful on yourselves. No matter what your situation is, no matter what sins you've committed, no matter what, you know, trauma you've been through in your life, you are here, you are alive, you are here right now in this moment. You know, you're doing well, but we need to learn how to heal from some of the traumatic experiences we've had, you know, navigate the environments, the, you know, traumatic environments that we live in, inshallah ta'ala. Hopefully we'll arrange a part 2, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan for everybody tuning in. I do appreciate it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you all. Sister Zafirah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. I do appreciate your time, do appreciate the information that you shared with us. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to continue to benefit from you and what you have to offer to the community.
Amen.
Amen.
All right. So you guys enjoy the rest of your night. Bi'idhnillah. Please make dua for Sister Zafirah. Make dua for her family. Make dua for me. Make dua for yourselves. Bi'idhnillah ta'ala. Make dua for our communities. We need to heal, man. We do. We need to heal in the worst way. And hopefully this is a start. Jazakumullahu khairan. Enjoy the rest of your night. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallama tasliman kathira. Wa subhanaka rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa salamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Record.